Okay, well, good evening, everyone. We're super excited to be able to do this evening. It's not really our typical presentation. We kind of have this is kind of a special presentation for Peace Church because you all have been such a huge part of this journey that we have, story of mission, journey of faith. That's kind of our theme going on the conviction that involvement in mission of any kind is itself also a journey of faith and a kind of process of transformation. At least it has been for us. So we sort of have four parts to this that we want to share with you, and have a fair bit of time here. At least what I read was until 8:30. So that's an hour and a half. That's a lot of time, and we don't want to just sit here and talk the whole time. So we'd like to have it be participatory, insofar as you have questions and comments. We'll sort of pause at the end of each section, and open it up for questions or comments. And if you don't have any, that's fine. We can just wait till the end and have a discussion then.
All right. So I think I recognized everyone's name that Nathan listed there. So I think we're kind of speaking to our team, our family of support that we've had over really 11 years, since 2009. We're Tom and Monica Liddle, and we want to share this quote with you. Listen to your life, listen to what happens to you, because it is through what happens to you that God speaks. Tom and I have been people who have tried to listen to what God is saying in our lives and really, really follow that call. And that's the story that we want to share with you tonight. And that story starts for us tonight in Duluth in 2003, really. Yeah. 2003. This is our house on North 7th Avenue East, just right down the street from Peace Church, really. And in 2003, Tom and I moved to Duluth from Seattle, Washington. And in Seattle, I had been studying at Bastyr University for 6 years. I'd been studying naturopathic medicine and midwifery. And I'd be more than happy to answer questions about that if anyone has any. But I'll say that when we decided to move to Duluth, it was for me to start a practice in naturopathic medicine and midwifery. Right before we moved to Duluth, Tom and I spent about 2.5 months in East Timor. And that was part of my medical and midwifery training. It was kind of the final intensive clinical experience I had. And when we were in East Timor, we both fell in love with the place. We were there in 2003 for the very first Independence Day that East Timor had. So that means that it was a really new country. It had been kind of devastated. And so we were there at a really a time of change for East Timor, a time of new independence for this tiny little country. And the people, we were drawn to them, and we were drawn to the place. And so we moved to Duluth, having just been in Timor and having this really profound experience. But when we got to Duluth, we felt like we were at home. And I'll let Tom carry on.
Okay, so 6 years in Duluth, and found out about Peace Church. Neither Monica or I grew up in the UCC, both background in different traditions, but like a lot of people who stumble on Peace Church, we found it to be a really delightful community and a good fit for us. And I had been for quite a number of years at that point a Bible geek and a theology nerd, and Kathy picked up on that right away and kind of shoveled one opportunity after another my way to help out with Bible study, to be involved in this and that. And one of the things early on was the opportunity to serve on the Wider Church Ministries board as the representative from the Minnesota Conference. And that experience was really important and pivotal for our involvement with East Timor. We didn't know it at the time, but it turned out that it was in fact through that service on the board that we found out about global ministries and eventually found out about the partnership with the Protestant Church of East Timor. And so that was a really critical piece for us. So, you know, we had, as Monica said, coming out of our experience in East Timor in 2003, we had this kind of gnawing sense that, you know, kind of like having a pebble in your shoe, you know, it's there, you kind of notice it, but, you know, you can still walk okay. We had really settled into our life there in Duluth and just loved our community, loved the church, and felt like we were leading meaningful lives, but we still had this kind of sense of call, this sense of draw to Timor. And we thought about how could we possibly get back there for a longer period of time. And in 2008, we volunteered and went back over for a couple of months. At that point, Hannah was 4. And this was sort of like, we wanted to just try it. Like, let's see how this goes with a 4-year-old. And we came back and decided that we were going to put all our energy into trying to figure out a way to do this full time. And at the same time, we had a sort of sense of ambiguity about this notion of being missionaries. You know, the history of colonialism, the history of Western domination and racism, and we just had conflicted feelings about that. But the more we learned about global ministries, the more we came to be very comfortable with this language of mission coworker, which is actually one that we just adopted in recent years. But it has a much different sense for us, and comes with a lot more humility and a much different sense of what it means to be in solidarity and accompany people. And the implications of it are really pretty simple. Number one, that there's a mission. And secondly, that there's people involved. And so I'd like to just put up a couple of sort of theological guideposts that we have found helpful throughout our experience. And the first one is Missio Dei. That's just Latin. It means mission of God. You know, and it's the primal kind of conviction that mission is something that originates in God. That mission, first and foremost, belongs to the person of God. And that this quote from John 20, I think, spells that out very well. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. Says Jesus, says the risen Christ to the disciples on Easter evening. And he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. And so there are a number of implications to this that we find particularly helpful in terms of how we approach mission. Number one, it's the conviction that wherever it is we go, whether it's in downtown Duluth, working with people at Chum, or on the other side of the world, that God is already there. That the Spirit is already active, and that what our task is to discover and learn what it is that God is already doing wherever it is that we would go. And then secondly, I think that another important piece of that is that there's no one church that has a corner on mission. You know, and so there's an element of mutuality that's built into that notion that God is the primal force of mission in the world. And so it's not like us from the Western Church are bringing a concept of mission to our partner, but rather we together with our partner church, wherever that may be, are rather participants in a mission that is already unfolding in and through the culture, the language, and the particular place where we are. And then lastly, I'll just mention that mission is patterned after the model of Jesus. As the Father has sent me, so I send you, in the same way that Jesus is sent, in that same kind of mode of vulnerability and weakness and solidarity, so too are we sent. And so it is a ministry out of vulnerability rather than power.
So were we gonna ask for people to comment?
Yeah, if there's any, I guess this is sort of the end of the sort of introductory remarks, part one. If folks have comments, questions that you'd like to kind of clarify on that, this would be a good time to do that.
I know most of us have used Zoom and know how to unmute or unmute yourselves. But if you do need some help with that, please raise your hand and I or someone else can help you.
And we can just go on too.
Yeah.
And it looks like Melissa wants to speak, and I'm actually trying to unmute, but I think maybe Melissa, you need to unmute yourself there.
I was just curious, is there slides or pictures that we're supposed to be seeing at the same time as you're talking? There was like that intro one when you guys first started, but I didn't know if there was.
Do you not see any slides?
No.
Oh, how about other folks?
I see them.
Yeah, I've seen
So how do I get them back, I guess?
We saw them.
We see one.
Well, we've seen the others.
We've had 6 different slides so far.
Does anyone know what I have to, I'm using an iPad, how I get to see the pictures again?
Well,
I'm not sure. The only thing I can make, oh, you got,
Melissa, you need to change how you're viewing.
Yeah.
You must have hit a button. that
Yeah,
changes
I'll keep
the view.
trying to hit buttons and I'm not
So
sure.
just try all the buttons till you get
Okay.
to the right place.
That's what I
so-
do. When in doubt, turn it off and turn it back on.
Yeah, I might do that. I could do that.
But that's all. You just changed your mode of viewing.
so it
Okay.
looks like Maddie has a suggestion, yeah?
If you swipe, sometimes I've used it on my phone and you can swipe in between views. So if you swipe towards the left, it might, if you drag your finger across different ways, it might get you back.
Can't swipe.
I'm just gonna leave and come back.
Okay.
Great. Technical challenges with Zoom.
Okay.
Go ahead,
So
continue.
I'll continue. So in 2009, because Tom had been involved with Wider Church Ministries and because he had learned about global ministries and we knew about global ministries, we learned that through global ministries, the United Church of Christ actually had a partnership in East Timor. And this partnership church actually had a clinic that needed someone like me to work there as their doctor. And so we had this opportunity come to us. We kind of sought it out and it was there. And so in 2009, we went to East Timor as global ministries missionaries, and we brought Hannah with us. She was 5, and we brought Simon with us, but he was not born yet. So about 2 months before we planned to leave for East Timor, I realized that I was pregnant, and I told Tom about it, and we told Kathy about it as the first person, and she gave us a good smile and laugh and encouragement. So we had a challenging day figuring out if this was really what we were supposed to be doing, going to East Timor. pregnant to work for years. And through discernment and prayer, we decided this is what we're doing. So we got to East Timor, and here's Clinic Emmanuel. This is where we landed for me to work. Tom, remember, he wasn't a pastor then, so he was there just to kind of figure out what he was supposed to do. And he'll share more of that. But what we landed in was a town in a rural area with this clinic that was serving 60 to 80 patients a day. It was, there was no electricity in the clinic during the day. In the whole town, the electricity was on from 6 p.m. to midnight. There was water, but the water was sort of sometimes unreliable in terms of faucets turning on. And no one spoke English. Everyone spoke Tetum. So, so we knew our first lesson was learning the language and learning about the culture and understanding the worldview to be able to participate in what was going on there. This is, well, you see someone you might recognize, Amena Cristo down there. This is the clinic staff. And most of these women are still working there. I've worked with them for 7 years that I've been in Timor. And the clinic looks very much the same. This is kind of our work area, our lunch area, our meeting area in the back of the clinic. The clinic is a ministry of the Protestant Church of East Timor, our partners, and these women are all members of the church, and they've dedicated their lives to serving their community.
So I like to throw this text in. This text, I think, is kind of another kind of a theological guidepost for us in terms of how we understand what it means to do mission, and an important part of learning what it means to accompany people in a context like this. This is St. Paul writing at the beginning of his first letter to the Corinthians, where he writes about this strange way that God is revealed in and through the cross of Christ. And he says, when I came to you, friends, I didn't come proclaiming the mystery of God in lofty words or wisdom. I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I came in weakness, fear, and trembling. My speech and proclamation were not with words of wisdom or the latest philosophy, but with a demonstration of the Spirit and power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on the power of God. And so that, our first assignment in Timor from 2009 to 12, I think, looking back on it now, it's sort of like that was a warm-up assignment. We were there for 3 years, and it was, we kind of came empty-handed. We came with gifts, we came with skills, and Monica's medical skills, and I have a background in carpentry, but primarily we came as learners, and we came in this weakness and fear and trembling that Paul talks about. I've always really resonated with that. I did my first sermons ever in Tetum, in the Tetum language, not English. When we got to Timor, I spent about 12 hours a day for about the first 6 months learning to speak Tetum. And I went after it like I've never gone after anything in my life. And it was one of the most valuable things that I've ever done. And one day, the pastors that we were working with there at the local church asked me, can you help us? We need help with leading worship in some of these small rural congregations and at home worship that we do each week, and so that became a real part of my own journey of faith and journey of transformation, really, and call to ministry. So this was kind of a big deal. This happened after about 6 months, and I don't know. I guess this was back when we had answering machines, but I can remember calling Peace Church. Nobody was there. It was the middle of the night. But to say that Simon had been born, we were about 6 hours away from a modern city. There was no electricity. And Monica, you know, as a midwife, we had planned to have a midwife help us, but at night when it was happening, the midwife didn't come. And so Monica took charge and just told me what to do. So the fun part was that there was nothing more normal in the community where we were than to have a baby. And so, you know, kind of going back to that theme of fear and trembling and vulnerability, this brought us down to a level that was really human, very human, with the community, and they, you know, they just took us in and helped us raise him.
There we are, 4 days after Simon was born.
Your own baby.
4 days.
And the community really did help raise Simon more than anything.
This young woman on the left is Junita, and she was, I think after about 6 months. The first 6 months I was with him a lot, and then we had Junita take care of him, and you know, so his first language was really Tetum, because after about 6 months, you know, the people that were with him from day to day were Timorese people, you know, and they talked to him in Tetum, and so his first word was Econ, which means fish, and he still talks about that, so he's proud of that.
All right, so Lydia is this little baby here, and you, Peace Church people, have supported this family. Back in 2012, money from Peace Church was used to build a toilet and a water faucet for Lydia's family, because she was identified as, the family was identified as a very much in need family. It also happens to be the family of Layla, who maybe a couple of you remember. Layla is now in midwifery school in Dilley through support of Peace Church as well, through some special gifts. And Global Ministries has given Layla a scholarship so that she can do her 3-year program in midwifery in Dilley. So I wanted to just share with you, Livia here, this is a picture of her when she's probably about 1 or 15 months, but she's the same age as Simon. She was born just a couple months after Simon, and I'd never met her family. I hadn't known about Layla yet, who was 11 years older than Livia. But when this baby first came into the clinic as a 3-month-old, Simon was about 5 or 6 months old, and Simon was this fat, roly-poly baby who was very, very healthy. And you know, we lived across the street from the clinic. I worked in the clinic every day, but I was able to eat good food, and I was able to wash my hands and have water and have a clean place. Livia came into the clinic with failure to thrive, which means that really she had gained almost no weight since birth. And she was dying. And me being, you know, a mom with a small child, it was really moving the day she came in with her family. It turns out that they're members of our church. I'd never met them before that day, but they're members of our church. And one of the clinic staff, of course, knew where they lived. And so we went to this baby's house the day that she came into the clinic, because we needed to help them transfer to the regional hospital for inpatient care, for nutritional help. And we went to the house, and it was a shack. and they had 1 jar of corn on the floor, and they had a couple beds and about 6 kids, and a dirt floor. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, you know, I can't imagine this being my reality. And so over the course of 3 years of working with this family, Livia had malaria, she had diarrhea numerous times, she was always sick, and it's understandable why she's sick. The determinants of health are not there for her family. So when we had some support from Peace Church in 2012 to do something, Tom and I made the decision to help this family. It's only one family, but we decided to help this family with a toilet and a water system to their house. And I do believe that has helped Layla be able to have the resources and help that she needed to be able to go through school and graduate from high school reasonably healthy. And so now she's able to be in midwifery school in Dilley. And I've just been thankful that we've been able to offer the support for her and her family.
So this picture actually goes back to our first few months in 2009 in Dilley. But now I love the picture because it kind of just gives you a snapshot of some of the realities, which in this case, the water, even in Dilley, in the capital city, was very unreliable where we were in our house. And so we had to carry 5-gallon buckets across the street and fill them up along with everybody else in the neighborhood and carry them back to the house. And you can see the expression on Hannah's face there. She's sort of, I think that captures her feeling at the time. And now we had 2 kids. So now we had Hannah and Simon, and 6 hours of electricity a day and water that was unreliable. And sometimes during the rainy season, we'd have water that would come out of the faucet, but it would look like mud water. So it'd be really dirty. And so that reality went all the way up and through when we just came back just a couple of months ago. But it was a time settling in there and learning a new way of living, learning how I think in an intimate way how much of the world lives much of the time. And you know, to have the experience of living with some of those realities for an extended, sustained period of time, you know, gave us a very different perspective on the world. And Hannah did adapt over time. This is her. You can see her belting out a song there on a Sunday morning in a rural congregation there. She before too long, I'd say probably before the first year, she was very fluent in Tetum and playing with friends and participating in community life. She went to public school in kindergarten and first grade. We had really mixed feelings about that. Corporal punishment is totally normal and acceptable pedagogy there. And nevertheless, we were always amazed at you know, she'd come home with her notebook and her teacher there, and the picture on the right, Professora Rita, she would somehow manage to teach these kids something. You know, there was in this one class here, there were about 55 kids, you know, no books, just bring a notebook and pencil and write down stuff in the notebook. And of course, everything in Tetum and Portuguese. Those are the 2 official languages of East Timor. Portuguese, a reflection of the long colonial history, and Tetum being the primary language that most people speak. So just say a couple words about my work during that first assignment. Some of you know that my background is in construction and carpentry, and I have always found that to be a very usable skill wherever I've gone, including East Timor. So I in every instance that I've been there, I've undertaken some pretty major building project, usually with Timorese alongside me, and that's been a real learning experience too. Just working together. This guy on the ladder with me there, Mario, he could drive a nail in any situation you could imagine, you know, but don't hand him a skill saw. So we complemented each other well. And also during this, you know, during those 3 years, I was given more and more opportunities to do ministry, to be involved in preaching and teaching and working with the youth. And at the same time, started to really think more seriously about continuing in theological study. Monica went to graduate school, and we had sort of decided earlier that I would skip that because of the cost. But I started to feel like this maybe was God's way of offering me and sort of luring me and nudging me toward more toward ministry. So this is that's sort of the end of our first assignment in Timor from 2009 to 2012. So if there's questions that folks have or comments, this would be a good time to throw those out.
I don't know how we'll know.
Monica?
Yeah.
Monica?
Oh yeah, hi Beth.
Hi. Hi. Yeah, so I'm just very curious. The last time I saw you here was you teaching my students about your midwifery practice. And so I'm curious how you found it there.
Yeah, well, I do plan on talking a little bit more, but I'll just share now since you're asking. When I've been in East Timor for 7 of the last 10 years, I've very much wanted to be very engaged in midwifery care. And the hard part has been actually attending births in East Timor, not because there weren't lots and lots of births to go to at home and help, or in the clinic, or even in the hospital locally, but because I personally didn't have the energy to work in the clinic all day long and then be available as women would call me, and they would call. That said, during clinic hours, we would always have prenatal visits, and I took it upon myself to teach all the staff who wanted to learn as much about midwifery care as possible. And so we also had loads of babies in the clinic. You know, about a third of all the patient visits are children 5 years old and younger. And so that included lots of babies, including very new babies. So taking care of new babies, teaching about breastfeeding, teaching about maternity care, that was all part of what I was actively doing during my last 7 years in East Timor. And I think that, you know, the system in Timor, the level of care is so basic compared to what we have in the United States. You know, even for women to regularly have their blood pressure checked when they go to see the midwives in the local hospital is not to be expected. Getting HIV tests or hepatitis B tests is maybe sometimes that might happen because there might not be enough tests for those things. So for me, I wanted to try to help the women in the clinic, the 5 women that I had working with me, to really understand as much as they could about caring for pregnant women and why doing certain things was important, how to do it clinically, and to also bring them to births with me. I did bring the staff with me to births when I attended.
And I assume those were all in their homes.
For the most part, yes. We had a couple of deliveries in the clinic, and in the last couple of years, I also was with a couple of women in the local hospital, but for the most part at home, yes. And the local hospital offers very little more than what can happen in the home, frankly. There's no kind of emergency services in Los Palos. It's a 2.5-hour drive over a bumpy road to get to a cesarean section if you need that. Yeah. And also sometimes cleaner in people's homes than in the hospital as well.
I'm sure, yeah. I have lots more questions, but I'll let it go with that right now. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Amena as this transition from East Timor to St. Paul in 2012. Many of you know Amena Cristoval, and Amena worked in the clinic for the 3 years that we were in Los Palos. She was a high school graduate, didn't have any opportunity, and found her way to volunteer at the local hospital and learn a little bit. And then she got herself a job at Clinic Emmanuel as the lab assistant. She was doing malaria tests and she was doing TB tests. And she didn't really understand what she was doing, but she'd learned some skills and she was putting them to practice and was able to do some good work in the lab in 2009 to 2012. There's a nice picture of her at a mobile clinic there in action without gloves, but there you have it. In 2011, Tom and Linda Curran came to visit us in East Timor, you may remember. And that was a huge gift. The same year, our boss from Global Ministries came to visit. From Global Ministries, we heard that any of the staff in Los Palos Clinic Emmanuel who would like to continue their education, Global Ministries would like to help you. And from Tom and Linda Curran, they met the staff and they met Amena and they loved Amena. And they said, Monica, if Amena ever has a chance to study in Duluth, we would love to host her. And so opportunity for being able to continue her education. But when I asked Amena if she'd like to have a chance to study in America, to study laboratory medicine, she said, yeah, I would love to do that. And so with the help of Peace Church, we made it happen. And that's after 4 years in the States. In 2016, Amena graduating, the Currans there and the Olsons there, who also were tremendously instrumental in supporting her.
So just before let's see, in 2011, heading into 2012, we got to this point where we really had to decide whether we were going to continue or whether we were going to go back. And I had, by that time, really felt like I wanted to do some more formal theological study. And so we decided that, but we also still felt like we wanted to continue in Timor. And so we decided that we would go back for a year, and I was going to try to get a master's in biblical study. And so I started looking around for possibilities for scholarships. And to make a long story short, partly due to my experience working in Timor, I got a very generous scholarship to study at Luther Seminary. Actually, the scholarship that I applied for was a one-year scholarship. And the seminary called me up one day when I was in the process, and they said, we're sorry to tell you that we've canceled that scholarship, but we're going to apply all your materials to this other scholarship that we have. Called the Presidential Scholarship. I said, fine, I don't care what it's called, whatever. Well, I went through it. You have to write another essay and do another interview and go through another hoop and all along the long. Well, I went ahead and did all that. And the guy called me up one day and said, well, we're really happy to tell you that you're going to receive this scholarship. And I was really excited, and we had at that point assumed that it was for 1 year, which we thought was just, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. You know, I could study for a whole year, and it would be a great break, and then we'd go back to Timor. When the acceptance letter came, it said, you're welcome to study for up to 3 years, free, tuition paid. And so we kind of took that as being providential. I took that as God is still speaking, if you will. If you've ever heard that one before. And so we decided to move back to St. Paul, and we found ourselves here on the campus of Luther Seminary. On the picture on the right there, you can see, maybe some of you were even there, I think you probably were, when I was ordained to the ministry of Word and Sacrament. It was a really special day. My dad preached, and Kathy was part of the service, and it was really nice. And so we felt like at that point that, you know, we were still oriented toward going back to Timor. Felt like the circle was not quite closed yet. Before we went, however, by the way, I think you might also know this, that I actually my ordination was as a minister in covenant with Peace Church. So I'm really an official minister in covenant of Peace. And my first call, if you will, was to serve as an interim pastor at First Congregational Church in Cannon Falls, which was a really great experience for 1.5 years. I was the pastor there while we tried to figure out our fundraising to go back to East Timor, and while they searched for a new minister. So I got to get some experience as a solo pastor in a very dysfunctional congregation, which was great. And so it was good. They appreciated what I had to offer, and I learned a lot too. So we did finally get to go back. We had intended to go back to Timor much earlier, and it took a long time for Global Ministries to come up with the funds to fund our appointment. And so we, you know, during that interim period, we continued working in St. Paul and speaking in churches, talking about what we'd hoped to do as mission co-workers in East Timor. And when we went back finally in 2016, this is a picture with the family here is one that is really close to us. They were the pastors in Los Palos when we were there before, and they're Simon's godparents. The first 6 months we went back were really hard. Hannah had been immersed in life as an American kid in St. Paul, involved in all kinds of extracurricular activities, and her protest when we told her we were going back was, "Dad, why are you trying to ruin my life?" And it was a hard 6 months. She spent a lot of time in her room doing her homeschooling work, and Simon also had a difficult time kind of readjusting and learning Tetum again. But then around Christmas, things turned around, and we kind of hit our stride again. But it was, we had a few months there where we were asking ourselves whether or not we were going to make it a year.
So we went back to Los Palos, and I went back to the clinic, and to very much the same situation I was in 2012, but things were different. Things were different. And as Tom said, I personally was asking myself, is this where I'm supposed to be? Was this the right decision after all? The clinic was still busy, was still going. The clinic sees 25% of all the outpatient visits in the whole district. of about 80,000 people. It takes care of a lot of people, the clinic does. But a lot of the things that had happened between 2009 and 2012 had fallen off during the 4 years that I was gone. And for example, the clinic staff weren't doing prenatal care anymore. They just felt like they just didn't feel they had the capacity to do that without me there. We had had over 25 TB patients being treated in our clinic in 2012. And when we came back in 2016, there were about 3. And I don't think that's because there's not a lot of TB anymore in Timor, but just challenges otherwise. And we had started a nutrition program in 2010. The clinic staff and I had realized that if we did a daily feeding program, that would be a way to identify patients that need nutritional support and care for them, and to kind of see them through to better health. And so every day we would cook in the clinic, and the staff would feed children. The parents would bring their kids in, and we'd do that every day. And every Friday we had a weigh-in, and things were going great when I left. But when I came back in 2016, that wasn't happening either. So I was also feeling like, there's a lot of new Timorese doctors and nurses and midwives that have been trained over the years since independence. The Cubans have helped out tremendously. They sent a whole group of Timorese to train in Cuba, and now they don't do that anymore, but the Cubans have helped the Timorese start a medical school in country. So I was feeling like, gosh, I'm not sure what my call is here. But I listened to the call that we have had for so many years to be here, and I waited patiently, and I just went to work every day. And there's plenty of work to do. There's plenty of work to do in Timor still. Beth was asking about midwifery care, and this is a young mom who'd had a very bad first birth, and she asked us if she could deliver in the clinic. So we helped her with a safe delivery in the clinic. This is a child with malnutrition, a type called kwashiorkor, which makes your skin fall off and swells your belly. It makes you puffy instead of really bony thin, but it's a type of malnutrition. This child had diarrhea for a month before he was seen, and he ended up needing to be hospitalized. This is a child, it's a before and after picture. So this child was treated exclusively at the clinic. This is a water burn, I believe. We had children come in with burns from boiling water, also from kerosene. Most people in East Timor use cooking fires, and so those are low to the ground often. And so boiling water in a pot is hazardous, and kids can sometimes have accidents like this. And so this kid came into the clinic, and we were able to treat the child with amoxicillin, clean bandages, changed nearly every day, some vitamins, and educating the parents on how to keep the child clean and healthy. And in a month, the leg on the right-hand side there is where we were at. So we had a really good outcome. This is Joni, 25-year-old guy with tuberculosis. I can't tell you how many 25-year-old men I've seen in East Timor with tuberculosis. You don't see 25-year-old guys in America like this typically, but this is not uncommon. After 2 months of treatment, Joni gained like 20 pounds, and was very healthy again. He was able to fully recover, but he was extremely sick when he came. So these two words, vulnerability and possibility, these are two words I like to use to describe Clinic Emmanuel Los Palos. We have on one side of the picture, we see a mom and a baby with scabies. I think you know that when we were in East Timor this last 4 years, there was raging scabies for several of those years. There were about 6 months where between 25 and 50% of all the patients who came in had scabies. And scabies won't kill you, but it will make your life miserable, and it will keep you from going to school, and it will keep you from being able to sleep, and it will keep you from being able to function at a high level. And we were the only clinic in the district that had the proper medicine. And so people found their way to us over time. The little child on the left this is a picture of a little girl with TB in her hip. And I gave her the clinical diagnosis of TB because it was going to be near impossible to get an x-ray for her. And her picture fit the bill. She had been at school and she fell down on her hip, and she came home from school and told her mom about it, but she was fine for about 2 or 3 weeks. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, she started limping and she started having a low-grade fever, and she told her mom that she was in pain. And a couple of weeks later, her mom brought her into the clinic, and this is what she looked like, crooked. And her one leg was starting to, the muscle was starting to lose muscle mass. And so we started her on tuberculosis medication, and again, within 2 months, she was better. You would think she was completely healed. She had no more curvature. She had no more pain. She was normal. She needed to be on treatment for close to a year to make sure that all the infections cleared from her body. But the reason that I share the story is because this kind of thing happens, and when people don't go to a clinic, don't go to the hospital, they will just go on and on until they're completely incapacitated. There's so many children with malnutrition. There's such a lack of access to the clean water that we need, the toilets that we need to have a good, healthy environment. And so the people who come to the clinic are vulnerable people. And the clinic offers the possibility of getting a diagnosis and getting a treatment. When we can't treat people, we send them to another hospital and a place that they can get better care that they need. So vulnerability and possibility. In 2016, our clinic celebrated 25 years of service in the community. And so we had a little birthday party and invited the community. I just wanted to share that with you. So in another year, 2021, it'll be 30 years of service in Los Palos for Clinic Emmanuel.
So Clinic Emmanuel is a ministry of this one local congregation, and it's if I knew how to do it, I would have a picture of the whole compound where the church and the clinic are. The clinic is right next to the church, and it's very much the kind of the day-to-day ministry of the congregation, and that's something that's always attracted us to this ministry. Is it's a very holistic ministry, you know. So on Sunday, this is the congregation of Emmanuel Church, and shortly after we got back, our partner church, the Protestant Church of East Timor, assigned me to be the primary pastor in Emmanuel Church. At the time when we got back, there was a vicar, so kind of like a pastoral intern. But there are about 70 IPTL congregations, and there are only 25 ordained ministers. So there's a real shortage of clergy. And many of the clergy or the pastors in rural areas are lay people. And so my assignment this time was primarily, first of all, as a local church pastor. And then I also was a mentor for 2 young pastors during the 4 years. And I thirdly sort of served as a resource person, organizer for continuing education of all the IPTL pastors. So most of these folks are either subsistence farmers or people who sell vegetables on a day-to-day basis. And so average income is probably $1 to $3 a day for most of these people. They are the poorest and most marginalized people in Timorese society. You may know that East Timor is a majority Roman Catholic country, 95%. And so the Protestants are definitely a minority and have a kind of a mixed reputation, or they, during the Indonesian occupation, which lasted from 1975 to 1999, most Indonesian Christians are Protestant because of the colonial history there, Dutch colonial history. The Protestants in East Timor were kind of aligned with the Indonesian occupation. And so after the Indonesians left in 99, the Protestant church really kind of buckled and kind of almost collapsed. And so it's been kind of our accompaniment as a United Church of Christ and Global Ministries during this whole period has been to sort of help them reimagine, what does it mean to be the church, in this time and place. So this just, in addition to Emmanuel Church, this is a local rural church that's about 7 kilometers away from the town center of Los Palos. And in addition to serving as the pastor in Emmanuel, I kind of organized a few colleagues that were in the area to kind of have a rotating schedule where we would take turns in the rural churches, both doing Sunday worship as well as doing pastoral tasks, funerals, baptisms, and visiting sick people, and etc. So I did some weddings. This is a baptism at a rural congregation. Baptisms and baptisms typically happen at Christmas and Easter. So I think I wrote a few pieces where I would do 8 or 10 or 12 baptisms at one time on either Christmas or typically at Easter. So that was always a very, very celebratory time. And it just felt like one of the greatest honors in the world to administer the sacrament of baptism and be part of these families and these children's lives. So these are the 2 young people that I mentored these past 4 years. On the left there is Alberto, and he was the vicar there when we got there in 2015 and 2016. And so for about the first 9 months we were there, Alberto was there, and he was really keen to continue his studies and wanted to do more in theology, because they basically have what's equivalent of a bachelor's degree in the United States. And so we figured out a way to get him a scholarship to a seminary in Indonesia, and he's studying there now. He came back to Los Palos in June and he's writing his master's thesis on the church and poverty. So he's using Paulo Freire and Gustavo Gutierrez. And so he came back for a couple months, and we spent a lot of time going around to members' homes and talking to them about their lives. And he's sort of really applying his studies to the concrete situation of poverty in his own place. And then Ayang there on the right, she was with me for about 2 years, and she was the vicar there after Alberto. And this picture here is her ordination on August 9th. She was ordained and is now the pastor of Emmanuel Church. So a really special time for her. She is a child of the church. She was baptized, confirmed, and went off to seminary, came back, and now she's the pastor. So it's pretty awesome. Is this me or you?
You start.
Okay, well, it'd be impossible to sort of talk about how important part of this our kids have been, but this is just an attempt at that. You can see Hannah there on both the left and the right. I mean, she went there for the first time when she was 5 and came back when she was 16. And some of the girls on the left there are also in the picture on the right. But sometimes people ask me, you know, how could you do that, you know, with children? And, you know, my response has always been, you know, I don't know how you could do it without children, because kids have a way of making you more human, making you more part of the community, building bridges, opening doors, just by being who they are. And that was certainly our experience. And Hannah had a really tough time when we went back in 2016. In fact, we sent her home for
2016, yeah.
We sent her home for the summer in 2017. And it was interesting, you know, when she came back at the end of the summer, she had a complete shift, and all of a sudden it was like her eyes opened, and she realized what a valuable experience she was having by having this life. And you know, she actually did a little presentation last night to a church down here, a youth group, and it was fun to listen to her talk about her how special this has been for her and what an important impact it's made on her life. So these are some of her good friends. We had part of our job here that we didn't really realize was going to be, we were kind of like house parents. We had along the line 5 different young people living on the compound with us who were from villages, and they were there to go to high school. And so Hannah became good friends with a lot of them, and as well as the church youth group. So these are some more of her friends.
Yeah. So again, Simon and Hannah share a birthday, February 15th. So on Hannah's 6th birthday, Simon came along in 2010. And his T. Marie's grandmother there is holding him in one picture, and he's all decked out for school there with his buddy Alphone.
So yeah, so his life was just, you know, that of a T. Marie's kid. You know, so he's now 10 and lived 7 out of 10 years of his life there. And school was in Portuguese and Tetum. So we're working with Simon now on kind of the shift from Portuguese phonics to English phonics. Okay.
So, of course, one of the most special times for us in the last 4 years was when 3 of you came to visit us, Jill Pospisil, Jessica Olson, and Andy Fina. Thank you for helping them to come over. And here's some pictures. What do you want to say?
Well, the picture there on the left is Jill and Hannah doing laundry by hand, which was our reality at the time when they were there. The municipal water supply was not working, so we had our well there, and laundry was a part of Hannah's chore every day, and so she had to do laundry by hand. So Jill got to do that, and her comment was, at the end of a week, she was like, you know, it's like there's really there's no life has no buffer here. It's just just really in your face. And then you've probably never seen Jessica Olsen washing her hair before, but there she is on the right, washing her hair at our water tank out. That's our backup, our reserve water tank on the right there. And Andy Fina got a haircut.
And they loved him after his hair was cut. No, it was great to have the three of them with us for almost 2 weeks. And we saw Jill a couple weeks ago. We were excited to see her. We're excited to see all of you in person when the time comes. When the time comes.
So that's the end of our presentation. We'd be delighted to answer any questions if anybody has any comments. Just want to close by saying again how thankful and grateful we are to Peace Church. This would have never happened. We would not have been on this 10-year adventure had it not been for you all. And it's been a huge part of our own spiritual journey, our journey as people, and we're really excited to move back to Duluth. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you guys because you have taught us so much. Like, I think, you know, to be on this journey with you and to open our eyes to a bigger world and how other people have lived. I've loved being able to share your columns and the things you've written in the Peace Bell over the year, every month. Each month we've shared something over all the time you've been gone. So, and your blog was awesome. So I just want to give thanks for what you gave the congregation, because you taught us that the world is a much bigger place.
Melissa Boyle raised hand.
Go for it, Melissa.
Am I on?
It's
How
on
did
me.
you, I didn't decide that the time was up and that you were ready to go back to Duluth? And then the other part of the question is, there no longer a doctor at the clinic? And then also, can you talk about what the pandemic has meant for Los Palos?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which part do you want to
I'll do the first part.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. When we went back in 2016, I think both of us had a sense of wondering maybe this would be long-term, like maybe we would stay 10 or 15 years. I guess we kind of decided after the first year that for a variety of different reasons, not the least of which is the age of both of our parents, that we felt like it was going to be after 4 years would be a good time to come back. And we also wanted Hannah will be a junior in the fall. So she wanted, although she's enjoyed the University of Tom and Monica, she wanted to have a normal school experience for a couple of years. And so we felt like kind of those two reasons together, combined with just feeling like, it was time for us to kind of go back to those roots that we started in Duluth and keep those growing.
As far as the clinic, amazingly, God is always at work. Amazingly, about 2 months before we were going to leave, this young doctor who had just finished medical school in Dilley shows up at the clinic and has a letter requesting that he can volunteer because the government would not be placing him for so many months in an official job. So instead of just sitting at home doing nothing, he wanted to volunteer at the clinic and use his skills. And so we opened the door for him to be there. And now he's got his accreditation from the government to practice. So he's officially a doctor licensed in Timor-Leste, and he's working in the clinic. So there is someone to carry on. For the pandemic, coronavirus, in East Timor, there's been 24 diagnosed cases so far, and no one has died. In fact, no one has been very sick at all. And the country has been in a lockdown situation for about a month and a half, since March 28th. Now it's to the point where people in East Timor are thinking that maybe this is all a hoax, because they're not seeing anything in their country that, big negative impacts yet. So things are kind of starting to get back to normal, and in another 3 to 4 weeks, the government may open things up again and life may go back to normal. But Indonesia has thousands of cases, and people are sick and dying. In Singapore, in Australia, in every country around East Timor, there are coronavirus cases. So because Timor is so tiny, and because they really shut the borders when they did, they somehow have managed, through some pretty darn good, amazing management, to keep things under control. We're concerned now that when things kind of open up in other places, and then when foreigners and traffic starts happening through East Timor, that it could be really ugly. But so far Timor has been a better place to be in than in the United States, frankly.
I missed the beginning, but did you guys pick up the virus, you think, traveling through Italy?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we went to Rome on March 1st. Yeah. And then we went to Greece for a few days. It was kind of like, we changed our plans. Each day we were reading and trying to figure out how to do it. And we ended up cutting it short about half of what the trip that we were gonna do, but probably in Italy. We were on some pretty crowded buses and trains and stuff. And so, yeah.
Tom?
Yes.
It's Roger.
Hi,
Hey.
Roger.
Did you have access to a library?
Not really, Roger. There's not much available, and that's one of the challenges, with especially with theological education. It's very limited resources. I mean, I had my own library that I brought, and then I had access to all of my electronic resources. But for most folks, it's, in terms of your literature, it's the Bible.
Mhm.
John and I have a question for you, Tom and Monica. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We'd like to hear more about your settling in plans for Duluth, beyond Hannah being a junior next September. But what about the other three of you? What are your plans?
Well, we're trying to buy a house.
Yeah.
I have an answer for that one. We're still listening. We're fortunate that Global Ministries has us on home assignment, and they haven't taken away our salary yet. So we are still okay in terms of having support. And even though we're not traveling around the United States doing the itineration that we would normally have been doing right now, we are doing a little bit via Zoom and online, and are open to doing it as much as possible. We're both still kind of discerning what we're going to be doing in Duluth next. Simon's going to be hopefully at Myers Wilkins School in 4th grade, and I'm thinking about having a conversation with Beth Bartlett and some other people in the community about what kind of things I'm looking forward to next.
I think we just overall decided that we would, you know, get ourselves back in the community and just go from there.
Mhm. Okay, welcome. We're glad
Thank
to
you.
have you here.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome.
Glad you're back in Duluth.
Looking forward to seeing how it unfolds.
What do you say?
What was that, John?
Looking forward to seeing how things unfold for you.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'll look forward to the conversation, Monica.
Good.
So,
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Thank you guys so much. This is, I've loved when Tom's been joining us for our Bible study on Wednesday nights, and it's made it so much richer, Tom. So thank you. So for all of these, you know, I look forward to seeing you in person, and we'll help with the move on our end once you are up here. So we'll let people know
Mhm.
how to unload trucks and
Uh,
at an appropriate social distance. And so God is yet still speaking in weird and wonderful ways. And I am
Yeah.
also looking forward to how it unfolds. So it's going to be awesome. So thank you so much. So,
Thank you for sharing your story. Having kind of watched you from afar over these years, it's fun hearing the whole story put together.
Good. Thank you, Betty.
Yes.
well, and this has been recorded, so I'm hoping to post it on our site somehow. So I'll get it on our site. So thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
All right.
you.